birthday. Okay, then. We're here to collect your royalty then, right? On that new one.
Actually, they've been significant.
Really?
Yeah.
Good.
And I'm not going to get told if I'm in the church's.
I don't think so. I mean, that's really something. So, honestly, you can go over here if you can.
I was okay, so it was doing that or parking and handicap, and I was like, no way, I'm not doing that.
Did anyone need an agenda?
She Father's on out there. Jonathan, can you get I just came through the house. Yeah. Hence why I'm in this is my Bob outfit today. I'm dressed down, I'm wearing shorts. Hey, Father John, nice to see you. I'm not sure.
Even 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Jonathan, have you heard anything from Bob?
How are you doing? He's not coming here. He might come at the end. I think Mark was before the end.
I hope he's okay. Hey, can you share me with the minutes, Jonathan? Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. I'd like to announce that this meeting is being recorded. With that, Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Yes, Director Grant.
Here.
Director Geis is not here. Director Bertrand.
Here.
Director Freeman. Here. Director Hedges.
Here.
Director Nguyen.
Here.
Director Turlow. Here.
Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, Aniscoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. With that, we'll move to the consent agenda. Anyone have anything they'd like to pull? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion to approve the consent agenda made by Bertrand, seconded by Thurlow. Any board discussion? Any public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0 with one absence. With that, we're going to open the public comment period. At this time, any member of the public may speak on matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Board of Directors that are not on the agenda. The Board will not take action on any item not on the agenda except as provided for by law. Are there any requests to speak on things not on the agenda? Okay. With that, we'll close public comment and move to discussion and action items. And I think we're going to begin with item 4, the district audit.
Great. So the 2018-2019 audit delivered much more quickly than the 2017-2018 audit. So we're really proud of that. It's only 3 months after the close of the year. So I'm just going to turn it over to Adam Geis. Not related to Bob Geis, different spelling. And he's going to present the audit to you all.
Alright, my name is Adam Geis. I was the partner in charge of the audit for the district this year. And what you see before you is the final financial statements for the year ended June 30, 2019. And I'm just going to kind of walk through a few things in here. There was a lot of changes to the district this last year. But to start off with, I just wanted to point out the first thing on page 1 and 2 is the independent auditor's report opinion letter. And we had an unqualified opinion, which is the best kind of opinion on the audit. It means that we looked through all the records and we didn't find any mistakes or anything, and everything is presented here is accurate to the best of our knowledge. The next couple pages here is a brief summary of what happened over this last year, as well as a look forward to 2019 and 2020. And this letter was written by Jonathan. And that's a good place just to kind of summarize, how everything's going. And, not in a text format rather than looking through all the tables that we have later on. So then page 5, this is the statement of net position. This kind of shows how everything was at the district on the date June 30th of 2019. So just the main thing I want to point out here is the district had a lot in cash and has no long-term debt and was pretty current on its payables, low balance on the accounts payable. New item on here is the non-current liabilities for compensated absences. What this is vacation owed to employees at the end of the year. Employees at the end of the year, vacation owed to Jonathan. But it's a balance that'll be tracked every year going forward as the district continues to grow. And basically means that if the employees were to leave like right at the end of the year, that's the balance that would still be owed to them for their unused vacation hours. The next page, page 6, is the statement of activities. This breaks out the expenses of the district by what they were used for. General operations, community programs, housing programs, public safety, as well as tries to match up some of the revenues that were related to those expenditures. The operating contributions and grants, that was the pledge from UCSD, and there you can see how it was matched up to where that money was spent. The next page, page 7, is the balance sheet for the district. Now this is a little bit different than page 5. The reason being is the fund statements. So pages 7 through 10. The fund statements are just showing items based off of a 1-year budget cycle. So they're not showing any long-term assets or long-term liabilities. And on this statement, it just again, it's a snapshot of where the district had its assets and liabilities, but then it also breaks down all the different portions of the ending fund balance. So the district worked pretty hard at the end of the year to look at what their needs were going to be in the future, and all of these committed items, these were specifically committed by the board as to set aside money for those specific purposes. Page 9 is the income statement for the year. And again, the big new thing here was the utility user tax. This was the first year that the district received the utility user taxes. And the district had a net positive change in fund balance of about $518,000 this year, as that utility user tax came in, and the district expenditures are ramping up as you guys make decisions on what to best use the money for. Skipping ahead a little bit, page 15 is the cash and investments note. And I just wanted to point out right now, all of the district's cash is invested and held by the Santa Barbara County Treasurer, which is a very low risk investment, a safe investment. It does have a little up and down as their investment pool changes, but it is a pretty safe investment. Note 3 on page 18, this is detailed the UCSD pledge. Basically, the UCSD pledged the district up to $200,000 every year over 7 years, starting with the 2016-17 year. Of the $200,000 pledged for 18-19, the district used almost all of it. But there is some money remaining, and that $93,622. That's a total, so that's not just what was unused this last year, that's what's unused since the district started. So there is still some money available for those programs. And then the last thing that I wanted to point out on the financial statements is page 20. And this is the comparison between the district's budget and what actually happened during the year. And as you can see, the district was well under budget on their expenditures. And then also, we included, were they attached, were the letters attached?
I just handed them the staple letter.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they got it.
Okay, so the supplemental letters, they're not officially part of the financial statements, but we sent them along with the statements, and they're kind of our recommendations as we go through the audit. We test controls, we test how the district writes its checks, how district payroll works, how the receipts are taken in, and if there's anything that we see as a recommendation to improve, we make a little verbal minor recommendations as we go along, but the two major things that we found this year were one, again, it was the first year that the district had any employees, but one of the federal requirements when you take in employees is to make sure that they fill out the I-9 form, and the district reviews that and keeps that on record. Basically that one's a formality, but since it is a federal requirement, we put that in here. And then the other thing with payroll runs, we know that there was review of the payroll before it was processed, but we do recommend that there's a formal process to have somebody review and sign off that they reviewed the payroll, just as an additional check that that was looked at and that is correct. Those were our only two findings and recommendations we had for this last year. And I do want to point out there were two findings and recommendations from the prior year, but we didn't see any repeats of those issues, so our recommendations were implemented for the year. We were out here in August and September, got everything we needed really well from Jonathan. And yeah, it was a pleasure coming down to serve you guys. Is there any questions on the audit?
Any questions? Ethan?
No questions, but thank you for working with us, for coming down to present today, and thanks to staff for getting this done really quickly so that we're ahead of the curve this time.
And I would echo that. Thank you, Adam, and thank you to the team at Moss Levy for coming out here and doing this. It's been a pleasure to work with you in the times that I've been there, and I've heard the same from Jonathan. So I'm excited at the strong position that we're in financially, and thank you for this report. Okay. With that, I'll open it up to public comment. Carmen?
I'd like to know how it could possibly be somebody's last name Geist is not related to Bob Geist, and they're both auditors.
That's true.
That's been a tough question.
We're spelled differently, so
Oh,
yes.
Asking the tough questions. Thank you for that. Okay, any other public comment on the audit? Okay, thank you so much. I really echo what Ethan said. This is great to have this in early, and I know that was one of the things that we had asked for when we had our first audit come back, so thanks everyone for your hard work on it.
We need a motion to approve.
I'll move approval. What are we calling it?
2019,
18, 19.
Motion made by Thurlow to approve the 2019 audit. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Hedges. Any board discussion? Any further comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absence. Thanks, everyone. Okay, with that, we are going to move to item 4.2, Won't You Be My Neighbor video campaign. And how fitting it is that we are back here again at the Youth Center to have our meeting and talk about this. Jonathan, you want to give a little bit of a synopsis of the proposal?
Yeah, the update is that we have, the narrative that the board requested, and then the publicity budget added onto it that was requested. And then I just wanted to make a note that the typo on the agenda says 7,000. If you see the budget, it's actually 7,700. I just missed the 7 there. So the budget request is 7,700, but that's nothing new to report unless
Good thing the
you
auditor
have
just left.
something to What's up?
It's a good thing the auditor just left.
Yeah, I know. It's not an audit issue.
Okay.
Nothing else.
Any questions on this report? Ethan, and then Jay.
Thank you. So I'm really excited about this. I think this will be a great opportunity to create a great product and really provide a meaningful opportunity for our youth in Isla Vista. So definitely support it. Jonathan, can you just remind us of what part of the budget this will come from?
3002 is the special projects line item. And I handed you all just a copy of our budget that we approved in June or in May with you. It's nothing, no actuals are on there or anything, but you'll see that we have 29,000 in that line item.
Awesome, thank you.
Jay?
First of all, I'd like to say that I'm very excited about the idea of doing this and I'm excited to fund it. I provide that hedge because oftentimes when I provide some kind of middling, like I'm curious about this detail or maybe some kind of change needs to be made, oftentimes it gets misconstrued as I don't want the idea. I want to vote for funding it as I did last time. Now that our lawyer is here though, I would like to bring up the idea, because this is still titled in our agenda and on the information here is the Won't You Be My Neighbor video proposal. And one of my concerns was that Won't You Be My Neighbor is a registered trademark of, I'm forgetting his name, the guy.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers. And also my understanding is that the original concept of the video, which may have changed, was to do essentially a musical cover, although with custom lyrics, to the tune of Won't You Be My Neighbor from Sesame Street. Not Sesame Street. Oh, what is it?
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I'm so sorry. I'm really bad at nouns and names and all sorts of things like that. But now that our lawyer is here, if, for example, he says this is not an issue or whatever, that unblocks a lot of things, or...
Well, thankfully, I originally went into intellectual property when I went to law school, not local government law. There is a concern about the use of the music because the music will be copyrighted. If the phrase, "Won't you be my neighbor," is subject of a trademark, then you do have to be cautious that you are not seen as infringing upon the use of that trademark. So this is the first that's been brought to my attention. The title of it is "Won't You Be My Neighbor." If you change the lyrics, you're transforming the work of art as it may have existed in some type of copyrightable form. But the music itself is subject to copyright. The sound recording is subject to copyright. And as you already pointed out, Director Freeman, some phrases can be trademarked. The point of a trademark is to avoid confusion as to source. So, "Won't you be my neighbor?" When people hear that, what do they think of? They think of Mr. Rogers. You would want to avoid the perception that this video campaign is in some way associated with Fred Rogers Enterprises, I believe is the name of the company. But at the end of the day, you don't want to inappropriately associate this with a piece of intellectual property that's owned by someone else. So those are the types of issues that I would look at to make a call on whether it's appropriate in its current form. Obviously, the idea itself is something that you can fund, but the particulars of "Won't You Be My Neighbor," as well as the use of the music, you can usually get a license through ASCAP or one of the other music licensing companies. Basically, you do that to pay a royalty fee. There are ways to navigate that, but this is an issue that's being presented to me for the first time. That's kind of my off-the-cuff legal analysis that stretches back to about 15 years ago in intellectual property at Santa Clara University. So,
Jonathan, have you had a chance to talk with the folks at the youth center about whether or not they're set on using the song?
We didn't talk about the lyrics of the song and the melody of it specifically, but I think they should be flexible from what they said last time.
Okay.
So
yeah.
we could fund the concept and work out.
As long as there's flexibility, so that we address that issue.
Yeah, I think when we make the funding, we're not tied to funding all something like this. So.
The last meeting, Ariel had even suggested that he could help them with it, and said Jason seemed very amenable to that.
Excellent.
So I'll move approval of this item with the caveat that we work with them on the royalty for the song. My concern, that's my concern. I think the phrase itself, but the song definitely you have to pay royalties, and I think that we should try and work around that, because if you go ahead and use it, and then later they come back, you can pay a lot of money.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Thurlow. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by
More
Freeman.
public comment?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I think Father John, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, you know, very obviously, we are not monetizing this. You know, I don't know how that affects things. But if we preemptively went to the owner of the license, the licensing agency, whatever that is, and were to explain the civic good of what it is that we're doing here, I think Mr. Rogers would rise from wherever he is or come down from wherever he is to endorse it and to encourage us to use it, to make full use of it and sign off on it. Now that's speculation, but I think that preemptively it really would be worth a call to those that actually own the copyright.
So we're gonna dispatch you to do that.
Yeah, I'd be down with that.
Christy?
Besides the whole copyright issue, I feel like this is a good marketing strategy too, just because a lot of people don't know that Isla Vista is not just a college town. So by having this, it's a great way for Isla Vista to get recognized, other than a college town.
Ethan?
Thanks. And do we just want to broaden the board direction to staff a little bit so that we don't necessarily need to go the royalty route? Like if they find another song or another concept, just work with staff to figure out the best way to move forward.
Yeah, like I'll write something real quick.
Okay.
See if,
While you're doing that, I'm gonna go to public comment. See someone in the back.
Yeah, I agree with Father John. I agree with that strategy. And ASCAP, those fees are often very small.
Yeah.
Just,
Thank you for that. So yeah, I wasn't joking when I said we're dispatching you to do that.
I'm down with this.
Okay, Jonathan, can you read back?
I wrote a motion to approve the funding request and work with St. George's Youth Center on proper licensing for the music.
Is that friendly with our maker and
Yeah.
seconder?
This is our second head.
Jane.
Oh, Jen.
Any other public comment on this item? Carver?
It seems to me there's a problem with the title also, and that should be included in the motion. Not just the music, but also the title, since that's copyrighted, I'm sure.
Can you read back the motion again?
Yeah, well, it said proper licensing for the music. We can say proper licensing for the music and title.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Any other comment on this? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0 with one absence. I want to thank the youth that we had at our last meeting so much for bringing this to our attention and for their continued participation in this, just because Christy's right, Isla Vista is a lot of college students, but they're not the only students here, and people need to know that. They need to make their voices heard, and this is a great way for that to happen. So thank you to them if there's any of them in the audience. Okay, with that, we're going to go to item 4.3, the Isla Vista Community Center Advisory Board appointments. We had our Community Center Advisory Board meeting on Monday, and I think that it went really well. It was not in our usual location, but we had good attendance, and the board had established criteria at the last meeting, or the first meeting that we held. And some of the criteria for vetting the applicants was lived or worked in Isla Vista, had experience in strategic planning or programming, say again?
Fund development.
Fund development, yes, the all-important thing. And there was a third one too, I'm trying to remember.
Collaborative relationships with stakeholders.
Good relationships with stakeholders. So we felt that all of our applicants met those criteria, and the board had some deliberation about who was best to serve the advisory board, and came up with the unanimous recommendation of Kim Yasuda and Melissa Cohen. I want to thank all of our applicants who participated in the process. We know that there's a lot of energy and desire to be involved in this. I want to encourage everyone who was involved in the process, whether they are on the Community Center Advisory Board or not, to stay participating, because we're going to need it to make this work as best as we can. So, any board discussion on this?
I'll move approval, selection of those two candidates.
All right, we have a motion by Thurlow. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Nguyen. Any public comment?
Was Frank Thompson one of the applicants?
No, he was not. Thanks for your question. Any other public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absence. Thanks, everyone. We look forward to having our next Community Center Advisory Board meeting, which is going to be happening the second week, actually, of October. So, or not October, November. We encourage everyone to join us. Hopefully back at our community center, or not community center, community room location. Okay. With that, we're going to move to item 4.4, Spring Community Festival update. So I think everyone has in front of them this proposal from Lucidity Festival for a Deltopia-inspired collaborative event. We've been continuing to work with Lucidity on planning some sort of a festival during the spring out of a few core realizations. The first is that Deltopia as it exists is not a safe environment. We see a spike in physical assaults and sexual assaults. We see a spike in medical transports as the result of alcohol and drugs. And our thought and our board's thought has always been that if we can provide people with a fun alternative where the community has the ability to plan the event, plan the content of the event, and have a better handle on what the security presence looks like, that we can change the overall feel to be a much safer event. And so I want to thank everyone from Lucidity for the attention and detail they put into this proposal, and want to hand it off to you guys to sort of give a little bit of overview of what's in here, and we can have a discussion.
First of all, my name is Ron Glover. I met some of you last time. I'm one of the 3 directors of Lucidity. And has everyone got one of these? We have some extras.
That's his thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Today I asked some of our members of Lucidity to join me today and to be more acquainted at any particular direction you want to ask us about our proposal. We tried to put one together that was pretty self-explanatory. This is not the end of all ends. This proposal can be changed and switched, and it's the first draft, and hopefully you look at it as that. And if we have any questions to my co-workers here, I'm going to introduce them. This is Luke, who is Luke Holborn, who's head of our creativity program. He's the director of our creativity program. He's also founder of Lucidity. We have Alan Avery, who is also a founder of Lucidity as well, and head of our security team. And we also have Sarah Marvel, who is also a director with myself and one other person. And she has put most of this together, arranging it so you can have something in front of you to be before we have it. So with that, I don't know if you've had time to look at it. Some of you, I guess all of you, maybe know the history we were approached by you guys to help out, and we're going to try and do our best to bring forth a palatable event that has a lot of harm reduction. And we've been doing this for 9 years. This will be our 9th year at Live Oak. And we've also developed a security team called the Guardians. And they have gone past what we do at Live Oak to help out other festivals. So we've come a long way. We know what we're doing, and hopefully we can help out. Any questions?
Okay, with that, I guess I'll go ahead and do questions. George?
What's our absolute drop dead date for making a financial decision to fund this event?
Well, we need several months to organize. I don't know if we've come up with a total deadline at this point, but we need at least 3 months to start looking at all the elements that we would have to bring in to make it work. I think that's a minimum. Sure.
One of the grounding pieces of this that's really important to that question you just asked is we are coinciding this with our own event that, like you said, we've been doing for 9 years at this point. It happens the week after the Deltopia sanctioned event, which is when we actually arrive on site and start building out our infrastructure. So for us, we could kind of expected to get a barometer of where we were going to land as far as a decision today, but obviously that might not happen. I personally would love to see it within your next board meeting if possible, and I'd be happy to answer any and all questions about the infrastructure and the budget that we have. And in addition to that, one of the other crucial pieces for the time frame of it is the proposal that's at hand right here is largely built on collaboration. And we're only here to provide the infrastructure because from our standpoint, one of the crucial points in actually preventing a lot of the problems that you see with an unsanctioned event is providing the infrastructure to help divert some of the smaller problems that snowball and become the citations, the arrests, and the medical transports, and so on. So for us, in order to engage the local student groups, the local organizations and communities, and also to get lower prices on the infrastructure that we would have to rent and all of the collaborators we would help bring in, the sooner the absolute better for not just us, but you guys.
So that went from 3 months to like 5. 4 months, split the difference. You know, we know it's a hard decision for you guys to make as well. So, but it's a lot to be taken into consideration of us trying to organize the outreach.
And before we talk more on this, do you guys mind sort of giving an overview of the proposal just for the benefit of the public really about specifically the different elements of the budget proposal that are listed on page 5 and onwards?
Okay. So you want to do that?
Sure. It's been broken out by our, ironically, marketing department head and manager who has had the oversight and the conversation with Alan here to really understand where the pieces are needed and how large or small or spread out or so on that we want to be. So there is still a malleable sense for this budget, I will say. We've built the leadership structure around similar structure that we utilize for Lucidity as far as department heads go. The site ops management is a very large piece that would oversee the infrastructure such as sanitation, porta potties, arranging all of the what do you call them, road blockades and fencing, anything along those lines. So that would be the site ops area. I skipped over the department leadership point, which is there is one figurehead, which in our LLC is me. We call it the cross project manager. It is a person who's meant to make sure that all of the pieces and wheels are actually moving and that all of the items are being procured on time. Stage production and talent curation budget. We see this as a very collaborative point for the community. We wanted to see first off, one of our proposed and in favor already without even asking us, Isla Vista Food Co-op is one of the proposed stage budgets for an open mic that they've done with us a couple of times now. There's also a proposal for a stage of the Associated Students Group, and there's a proposed stage for the Lucidity Group, which that budget contains the infrastructure as well as the curation, which would be, at this current point, we're looking at a very local curator that has done curation for Lucidity for a number of years and is a member of our production team, but we're also open to a lot of suggestions. But like I said, the infrastructure and the curation is part of that. Fabrication and install is what we like to call it. It is the actual stage build-outs or the environment spaces, as we call them. They and additional decor to kind of create this very wonderful hug, as we like to call it, rather than just fence lines. Kind of ingratiate people to come in and enjoy the public space. Community outreach and communications budget. There's a couple pieces of this one. One of the larger pieces, and I'd love Alan to speak to this, is because he's also part of the safety and security portion of the budget, which is we really want to empower a lot of the groups that we see on Del Playa to utilize what we do with guardianship to basically provide the eyes and ears that we would need when they're in those high ruckus situations where they're having their participatory end of the party and still know all of the resources to call on us. So with that comes the legwork of sitting down with all of them, enrolling them, getting them involved. Additional to that is talking to local businesses and trying to create a cohesion in the area that we're talking about. So there's a little bit of public outreach and sitting down and making sure that we're supporting the people that are doing that legwork as well. I'd love, Alan, do you want to talk about the safety and security budget and how guardianship does?
Yeah, sure. On the safety and security side, like Ron had mentioned, we've been working on the harm reduction side in Lucidity for the past 7 of 9 years that we've been doing it. In the beginning, we brought in Black Rock Rangers from the Burning Man community and learned a lot from them. And now, on the flip side of it, we have a lot of them enrolled in what we're doing. So the Guardian team has merged itself with security and have become Guard Card certified in California. And so we're able to approach events that would not normally take on the extra budget of having harm reduction, and they get it because they're required to have security. So they like the idea of going with a security company that's focused on harm reduction. They get it two for one. So I just drove back last night from Dirty Bird Campout, where we were at for a week, and it was an 8,500 population festival that we provided the security and safety for. We had around 55, 60 security and 30 harm reductionists, and we only had two arrests and 1 ambulance out. Everything else was contained inside the event and worked through our services. We were busy, we had a lot going on, but it feels great when we can reduce that outward. And my understanding is, from looking at the statistics here, that Deltopia has been around that, or maybe just above. Maybe we've hit 10K people here in the last couple of years. So that feels good, knowing that Northern Nights was another event we had earlier this year that was at 8,000 population. So we've been managing similar size events this year. Yeah, we're super up to the task. This is our home also, so we're excited to
Another portion of the safety and security budget is budgeted line item for medical. One of the things we really pride ourselves on at Lucidity is we have a very, very, very well staffed medical team on site. For us, it's predominantly because we're, out on the 154, pretty far away from a hospital, so if anybody has an immediate emergency, we're able to support them right there and then. It also cuts down on a lot of the transports that you would have for dehydration, for sun exhaustion, all of the other things that are minor and can be solved right there with the proper supplies and team that is staffed and educated on how to solve those problems right there. So that's one of the things we really love to see brought to this event as well.
I have a question in the statement to the rapid Joseph. Justin, I'm not sure of what you've seen in the past here in Isla Vista during the Deltopia, but at Dirty Bird especially, there's a large amount of cocaine, ketamine, alcohol. I know alcohol is an issue during Isla Vista. I'm wondering if there's any other, is it mostly alcohol that we're dealing with?
It's mostly alcohol with sprinkled bits of other substances in it, but the large majority is alcohol.
And then finally, our last area that we have written is the administrative side of things as well, as far as insurance, procuring insurance, contracting local groups that will actually be participating, and, as well as ourselves for that matter, contract ourselves. I just wanted to add a note. Like I said, this is heavily 100% rested on collaboration. We do not want to give any sort of representation that we're coming in and showing people how to do it. We're just here to provide the support, and we're really, really well crafted at community guiding, basically, and collaboration. So that is exactly what we want to provide this event, is the infrastructure to make sure that everyone feels safe and supported, and the collaboration so that everyone gets to play. And we've been waiting for this opportunity.
This might be a silly question, but what kind of music do you play at your festivals? Just because that's a huge marketing thing.
Yeah.
People go to festivals, listen to a certain type of music.
So what we do for our genre of festival, because there is surprisingly genres of festivals, is called transformative. So we end up with a lot of electronic music, but we also do have a lot of live music. However, one of the things that we also do is we do a community poll to find out who people are most interested in and listening to. And I can't imagine we would go any further without finding out what this local community likes to listen to. We do have the budget currently at Local Heroes, of course, and I do know that UCSB is planning their event that they had in previous years at 6 p.m., which is the larger name, big headliners, and we're not trying to compete by any stretch of the imagination. So for us, it would be a guiding post, but it would likely be, from our research, electronic a little bit, but we would really love to see that the Associated Students stage, or as we see it, the Associated Students stage, whoever houses that stage, would be local live bands. But like I said, we would start with who does everyone want to hear?
Yeah, that's a good plan.
Thank you. Jay?
I have a number of questions. Taking notes throughout here. Okay, first of all, on page 5, it's beer garden will be community organized drinking space to allow sponsors to showcase their product while creating a healthy and monitored space for alcohol. When you say sponsors, do you mean local restaurants, or do you mean Heineken, or?
Well, I don't know that Lucidity would ever want to say Heineken. We prefer local. It's part of our ethos. So the beer garden is current.
A local brewery as opposed to like a restaurant in the loop.
I can name them all if you want. I love beer, but the point of the beer garden at this current moment is another revenue generator. So there is opportunity for sponsorship, and we see that as an opportunity that even though people would likely purchase the beer in one way or another, whether it be a pass or an individual beer price or so on, this is still something yet to be ironed out and how we, the Royal, want to do it. But likely the drive to bring in sponsors would be the fact that they'd be showcased in a very key location in Isla Vista. So as far as sponsors go,
I can pretty much rest on the idea that it will likely be local. And I do know that if it were to go large, the largest I think we would end up going, unless someone else objected, would probably be something the size of Firestone, which is participates with Earth Day as well. They're known for being a locally sponsoring group, as an example.
Yes, local brewery or winery
Yes.
would be in that vein.
Okay, I wasn't necessarily, when I first thought, I was thinking that we might be talking about like restaurants that have alcohol permits in the area, as opposed to, so.
To add to that, one of the things that I was pretty adamant about is that you don't really need food trucks and food vendors for this event because of where it's placed, or where we're proposing to place it, I should say.
I certainly will say that if we brought in a number of those, we'll get strong pushback from the local restaurants.
Exactly. So part of the community activation board, their role would be going to each of the local restaurants and enrolling them, and in a way letting them know that this is happening in their neighborhood, and proposing to them perhaps that they would participate in daily special for Deltopia or whatever it becomes named if it changes. So trying not to compete with local businesses, but help enroll them and bring them more business. And I know it sounds silly because everybody has access to those restaurants all the time, but that's why we'd love to find a common ground with them participating.
On page 7, it says it is unclear exactly what size population this public sanctioned alternative to the historic Deltopia party may draw, and then hedging on the idea of planning for some potentially large event. Question I have is that given the idea that we're selling tickets, do we not have the opportunity to decide the maximum size of the event, or are we concerned that people will just come any?
So everything that we've been discussing has been a public event, no tickets sold.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood then on, oh, I did misunderstand, because the ticket sales is on page 13 for Beyond Deltopia right after the, all right, that makes sense. Okay, so no tickets for this event is the idea.
No, it is a public streets event, and one of the things we talked about with Spencer was that we don't want to put fences everywhere and make it feel like a deep enclosure, because that actually deters people traditionally. So having it be an open sanctioned event at the same time is very important.
I guess I'm going to skip then to page 12 on, so there's revenue generating opportunities. What kind of cost recovery do you think might be possible?
That, at this time, it would depend on, I mean, we bring in, for our sponsorship, we bring in roughly about $100,000 in sponsorship alone, but that is for infrastructure, and we tend to, as we bring in drinks for our green rooms or something along those lines, that's an expense we don't have to provide anymore. So we take that off of our bottom line. As far as the beer garden goes, it does depend on how you structure it. I have proposed a tasting similar to like Surf and Suds does, so that way you can control the amount that a person is drinking, but it also brings it back to that very communal camaraderie, or we can sell by a cup. It is yet to be determined exactly how much revenue could be generated from those areas, but I think if we wanted more information on that area, I could definitely get it ready for the next board meeting that you guys would have.
So part of what I'm asking there is so we've got, you mentioned line items on things such as, for example, medical, but is it verified?
Is it not in there?
What I have is just a summary, like I've got line items in the sense I've got things that
No.
it says medical, but it doesn't have like an amount for medical. Like you actually have like a version,
It was linked, but I forgot to print the
okay.
budget.
I was even looking at the links
It should
here.
be on page 3, I think. There's a link at the top of the page.
Page 5.
You can have mine for me.
Cool.
Or is it page 4?
You're saying
page 5.
You're
Top of
saying in
page 5.
like it's linked in the document from the top. I see where that is. Okay.
If you have the printed copy
anyone else
with
who needs a
the
printed
sheet
copy,
on there,
I don't.
there's a tab that does have the line items.
All right. Yeah, I did not catch the hyperlinks inside of the PDF file. They were inside of the. Got it. All right. My part of my question here is I'm wondering how tight you think this the total expenditure is, because I mean one concern I would have is that we enter into the path with it's not a small number, and then as we go on through the process, more costs end up becoming discovered, and we end up in the possibility where we're actually doing like a trade-off between, is this event going to be dangerous, or are we going to throw more money in, or are we going to have finding wherever that money might be, or just suddenly have to scrap the whole thing because we're concerned that without throwing the extra money in it would be dangerous and so on. So.
I believe the final number, you have my copy, so
Oh,
I think it's.
well, yeah, I gave that to.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I pulled it up on the computer, so
Oh,
I actually
okay.
don't need your copy anymore. The one that was in here, that was $184,850.
Underneath. Thank you.
It was very informal.
What we would love to do is when we would get to a formalized point where we're actually making the final decision, we're very, very good in our organization of that's your number, that's what you hold to. If there are any requests for overages for any sort of incidentals or anything like that, we do have a way in which we regiment that. So typically, the way this would happen is it would go up through the event producer to your board as well as our directorship for approval and oversight, and of course, any sort of reason why this is absolutely necessary. So the way that it's currently built out is meant to be the final number. That being said, the amount of, how do I put this? For me, I work this event, Lucidity Festival, which is a relatively small festival in comparison to things like Coachella. I do work large events, and the thing that you see most common is where you don't put money towards infrastructure, especially for something that happens whether you like it or not. You have two options. One, you provide the infrastructure and then people naturally gravitate into those funnels and they're supported. And they feel supported and then they're happy and there's less likely to be sort of pushback and any sort of problems. However, the other option is that you have an unsanctioned event and you have all of the expenses of trash being left behind, of vandalism, of infrastructure that is not movable, that is permanent, that is damaged, all of the other things. So I do absolutely hear your point, and as a director, one of the things I'm always pushing towards is spend less money, please. So that is definitely on our forefront of making sure that we stay within the budget that we play with. We're very used to doing that. But as far as, and Alan will speak after me, as far as the snowball effect that you're talking about, one of the reasons why we as a company really are invested in this program is one of our core values is communal reciprocity. It's putting your money where your mouth is and making sure that you're supporting the organizations that you care about. For us, it's putting the effort and love into a community that we care about. So we're not really trying to break the bank here. We're really just trying to make sure that there's enough infrastructure. When I heard that we were selling 3 porta potties over previous years, my heart sank because I was just immediately triggered by that. I definitely want to make sure that you guys understand we're just here to provide a service as best we can, and I'm very happy to also look at revenue generation opportunities, and like I said, we'll keep the budget pretty much in that ballpark, as close to it as possible, and definitely under.
Yeah. We've been producing our own 3-day event where we're on site for a week, building and taking a county park and transforming it into a space where 5,000 people are living for the week. And so we've gotten pretty good at creating a budget, staying within it, and we've padded this enough to where we're not already envisioning every single piece that we're bringing in. We're creating that padding so that for the instances that you're talking about, something comes up, we have to consider this, that's there. We're not wanting to propose something that then snowballs, out of our grasp either. And so I feel like with the number, especially compared to the $750,000 spent by law enforcement to be in the neighborhood for the day only, and the anti-campaign by IVCSD, which I'm not sure that actual number, but it was in the hundreds of thousands, I believe.
Not that high.
No,
In the past,
50,000,
50 to 30.
Yeah.
50,000. I feel like we're using those as a gauge also. At how low can we come in and create the lowest lowest amount of infrastructure and personnel that still can gauge maybe a slightly higher influx of people coming in, although we're putting the word out there, hey, this is a local event, please don't come from out of town. We still might have a little bit of that, and just like you and from you and with you, we're trying to gauge all of that. So I feel really comfortable with the numbers, and I know it can be uncomfortable when we're all dealing with something we're not sure about. So I understand that, and I'm here to work and talk together to feel good about it.
So what I'm about to say, to be clear, is not to push on the number at all, but just to make certain that there's kind of like some context. A lot of those expenditures that had previously been happening were from our perspective, other government entities, and so the total budget that had been possibly for bad thrown at this event was larger than the total budget of our entire organization, and so we are a little bit more restricted in our ability to take control of it. And there's also some issues of like, well, is that shifting responsibility that, you know. So on page 7, you note that, to speak to this idea of potentiality for higher cost at unsanctioned events, on page 7 it notes that the entirety of the event from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Is the idea that the event would firmly end at 8 p.m. and then all of the staff involved would leave and start dismantling?
I believe the UCSD events typically start at 6 p.m. So our idea would be that it would end a little before that, so that it would shift that large crowd to that event and help kind of, move it in a parade towards the UCSD area.
Because UCSD is still having an event. Okay.
I believe so.
when we
Unless they
met
change
with
something
them
in the last
this week,
week.
yeah, and I'll say that we've talked about ending it sometime in the realm of 4 o'clock, based off of conversations with law enforcement about when a lot of the bad stuff starts to happen. We see an uptick in the late afternoon.
So I guess my concern is in some sense the opposite on that, which is the idea that you get people to come out, you get them riled up and excited, you get them potentially even a little drunk, and then you say, okay, the event stops at 4 p.m. and now what do they do? And I think that was actually one of the concerns the one year that there was the riot, of the idea that as opposed to having places people could go, even though it was as everything had to end due to things like the noise ordinance, that suddenly you ended up with a giant crowd of people who had nothing to do but cause trouble. And so I guess my concern is the idea that we end up with a bunch of people who potentially are even coming to the area with an open event, which I had always envisioned this to be a ticketed event, one that felt weirdly controlled, one that in all of the messaging for it made it clear that there's like a point at which everyone is supposed to leave the area because you're closing the event. We've got fences around some parts of the area, not necessarily large fences, but like rope fences and security guards around parts of the loop. And so I'm a little concerned about the idea of essentially ramping Deltopia back up and then not running anything in the points in time when I would have considered it to be the most dangerous.
So, to speak to that directly, if you'll, I actually don't know where in this, but with the exception of the beer garden, the majority of the content we're providing has nothing to do with alcohol. We're actually trying to provide something else to do than drink alcohol, so that other people that might not necessarily find a fraternity party with lots and lots of copious drinking to be interesting will now have 3 stages to pick from, as well as activities and games to play, all sorts of things. And it would spread out the crowd as it is to our area as well as presumably the Del Playa area. So likely, from our perspective, the intoxication factor would actually go down. So that is one hope. Second is when we're ramping up, what we're doing is not ramping up a negative, hell yeah kind of thing, pardon the French, but more of a, this is wonderful, we're a community now, and we're honoring that community, and by enrolling a lot of the different organizations and houses that have been problem houses in the past and so on, we are encouraging that if they are going to provide any sort of entertainment afterwards, that they still follow what we're talking about. With the times and hours, we always need to have some sort of presence as well after an event ends for exactly what you're talking about. So that is part of the plan as well, because we deal with that even at Lucidity. You'd be surprised how many people want to stay in a campground for some reason. It's definitely in the framework of let's try and help people see that there's something happening over here. So now here's your next step. So the UCSB is the next step in our eyes, as well as if anyone is going to continue to have a party in the area, please keep these parameters in mind, keep these ideas on how to minimize conflict, who you can call if there's a medical emergency or any sort of fight that breaks out, still having the resources available, even though the party that we are creating is tamping down. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, for sure. Also, this is a loose framework of us as one organization without speaking with other organizations and getting input. So this is valuable input as well. And having our security go until 10 or 12 and keeping a medical around that can help support the area in general, like these are all things that are would make a lot of sense and help. The idea has been always to funnel the party over to UCSB, but then there are probably quite a bit of students that, or that aren't students, that wouldn't be, would have the UCSB party accessible to them.
Generally, the people that are considered the problems aren't the UCSB students, they're the out-of-area people who end up coming. So.
Right. So, how late this thing goes, or if it's an open event, how late we maybe close the beer garden at a certain time by sunset, something like that, and we still allow spaces for people to gather and celebrate spring together. And like, there's a lot of cool open mic or comedy type things that could be hubs where people are still able to socialize and they're not feeling like they're either left to try to drive somewhere now intoxicated, or go to, you know, out exploring, looking for something to do, not sure if there is something out there or whatnot. If we do get some of these other historical houses and fraternities involved, and we have them coming and having their games, being involved in like teams during some of the activities, I imagine they are still going to have drinking back at their frat house. So it's just really developing that relationship early on. And then, I mean, one positive out of that is we know where people are going. So it's like having an open dialogue and hearing and knowing of where some of these things are naturally going to occur as after parties. And like I said, if we have a plan to have security and harm reduction stay on after, then we can continue to be a resource with the local law enforcement and emergency services.
That all sounds great. And also, I'm fascinated by this idea, which I also marked down here, is that working with problem houses, as you call them, on Del Playa. Have some handful of concerns. The idea of it allowing the party to almost feel sanctioned bigger outside of the scope of this more security area. But I love the idea that you're talking about of trying to get those people to be involved in the spirit of the event and trying to get them to think about it in the same way as what you're doing. So I'm fascinated by that part, not bothered by it. And then the thing that George had brought up with relation to timing and everything, I guess one of the first things I had noticed is the idea of budget approval happening today. We're not even agenda to approve the budget today.
No, we're just reviewing this and getting to action.
Yeah, so I'm not even I'm not certain what the soonest we actually even can do something like that might be. I mean, I guess if we try to do it really hard, we try really hard. So, thank you.
I'd like to point out something that you said you thought was a good idea as well. These houses, we're trying to do something that hasn't been done before. So I'm a firm believer that nobody really wants to have trouble. Nobody they plan their house to have a party, they're not looking to have trouble. So we're doing something that is unique by going in early, changing their headspace from this unsanctioned, go for broke, drink as much as you can do, communication up front. First off, have them agree with us. Do you want the police at your door? Do you want, this type of thing happening outside of your house? I don't think they do. And I'm willing to bet on that. So I think if we go in and do something that they're not expecting us to do by coming in and saying, hey, you want to partner with us to put on a great party.
Okay, so I've got a stack. I'm going to go to Ethan, Father John, and then Christy.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you all so much for being here tonight and putting together this proposal. I think it's clear from all of us and everyone who's experienced Deltopia that the way it is right now and the way that it's been for so long is not safe. It comes with a lot of issues. People do have fun, and we definitely honor and value that. But there's fun for some people at a very high cost for the community. And that's, I don't want to sound like a wet blanket, because I really do appreciate the fun aspects that do exist now, and I want to see those continue. But we also do need to handle the public safety issues that come along with this event, and the toll that it can take in some ways on our community. So when I look at this proposal, I see this really as something that we should aspire to as a community. I do think that this is something that has great potential for really shining a spotlight on what's beautiful about Isla Vista, bringing people together to have a great time, and doing it during a time that typically presents us with many challenges. So I'm all for where we move towards this. As far as this first year of doing a sanctioned event during Deltopia, I am afraid that this might be a little bit too much to bite off in this first year. One of my concerns with it is, as you mentioned, Jay, this is, if we were to be the only organization paying for this, it would be quite a big cost of our budget. So I'd be interested if there's potential for Associated Students Program Board to contribute to this, or any other local organizations, just because looking at this price tag and looking at our budget, we cannot, in my opinion, looking at the budget, justify that expense. We can certainly pay for a part of it, but I don't see how we can pay for the whole $180,000. So I'd be interested in seeing how we can perhaps scale this down a little bit and bring on some more partners and still pay as much as we can, but just knowing that we can't pay for this whole part that's proposed right now. Number two, I am concerned about the open aspect of it. I do think that that's something that we want to aspire towards, but I don't know if we're there yet in this first year. This sounds like a lot of fun. This sounds like if it was in another town, I would want to go to it. And I think that other people are going to think that when they see this planned on Deltopia weekend in Isla Vista. I really think that we need to focus on being good neighbors regionally. I know the city of Goleta puts a lot of work in every year to prepare for the influx of people coming to town, and I think we need to work in collaboration regionally with the city and with the county to continue our commitment to making this a fun event for Isla Vista residents. So that does get me thinking about if there is potential for some sort of verification, whether that's ticketing or another measure where we can verify that it's Isla Vista residents or people affiliated with the community who are attending the event. I would love to move towards an open streets event, but I just don't know if we're there yet for this particular weekend, which already brings so many people out. But even with those 2 points in mind, as far as the cost and as far as the open streets, I do think that we need a sanctioned event this year. I do think that it's great that we're speaking with an organization that has a track record of putting on really good events with high quality content, and I'm excited for anything that we can do within this.
Okay, speak to this.
Yes.
Oh, you.
Just a direct reply to both of those points. I can understand where looking at an open event might seem daunting and kind of open-ended, like, hey, what can we expect from this, but from our standpoint, or at least from my own, the reason that we're looking at having and showcasing local for that most part is, sure, it's going to be a fun event. You know, Santa Barbara also, you know, you look at summer solstice, you look at Earth Day, these are great open public events. Putting this around the idea of a spring lights festival where Isla Vista can kind of celebrate this together on a day that is notoriously a party day is something that we're all challenged with. I feel like if you start to charge people for what we're doing, we're also not gonna deter outside. People are gonna come and wanna pay for that thing, and then if you're paying for something, it's like that to me almost feels like what you're saying. It's like, oh, this is something I'm paying for. They're gonna have a higher caliber artist there. There's gonna be these things like I'm gonna get my money's worth. I'm gonna go. Whereas if it's something free and we focus on local, then the people that are coming to support local. And it feels to me like that's gonna inspire more local activation. And of course, that's my hope. The other is on the money side of things. And, you know, this is our first pass. We need to make sure that we cover it and that we cover it well, especially on the safety and security side of things. We also were expecting that there would be multiple organizations contributing to that. And we also imagine that through sponsorship and through the beer garden and whatever potential revenue generation we can come up with as we continue to build this plan together to cover a lot of that, so that it's not something that's completely out of pocket.
Got it. And I'll clarify too, that's all really helpful. But one thing, just so everyone knows where I'm coming from, like I totally see these prices as like valid. My question is more just if we're able to do an event at this scale right now. Like I'm not questioning the numbers you put here. Like for what it lines up to, totally makes sense. Just my question is whether we want to go to that scale right now.
Just a quick add, I'm sorry, I'll be very succinct. One, the way that we had been approached it was always with the understanding that there would be revenue covered from multiple organizations.
Sure.
So that was our perspective. Secondly, I think you'll find that in closing an event, it actually gets significantly more expensive. Not only in having to actually check everyone, but then you also have to provide a box office team, you have to provide the infrastructure of fencing and all of the credentialing, and likely for something this size you would have to have things like what they call the you pass through and the metal detectors, those. It gets more expensive when you close it. So for this is actually the most cost effective to do it, and everything else.
Got it. So then if we are to keep it an open event, which I'm totally interested in exploring, but still have to convert on that idea. But if we were to go that way, I still think that it's going to be important for us to really have a focus on keeping it local in here. And not necessarily in the way that we've done that with local community campaigns in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Could be something different, but just something where we're really working to keep this an event for Isla Vista residents.
I did forget to mention any sort of public notice or advertisement of this event, and by public I mean targeted to this area, would actually come with a disclaimer of either UCSD students only or local residents only or something. They don't know we're not checking. Mm-hmm. But it definitely deters the person from Santa Maria from driving down here with the expectation of party hard, because they might not get in. You know?
Thank you.
So that was something our marketing director said here. So.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you, Ethan. I'm going to go to Father John and then Christy.
I've been talking with a lot of UCSB alums from downtown and actually all over the place over the last few weeks about this very thing. And you know, one of the lines that I've said is one that I think I said here last time, is this isn't Altamont with the angels for security. You know, this is You've used the word curated several times. I've been resistive of that use in current English, but yet you have curated this event. I mean, you really have examined contingencies in a way that's like what we talk about in incident command structure in law enforcement. I mean, you quite literally have adaptability, expandability, contraction potential if necessary, that is responsive to the real time of what is actually happening in a way that I've just got to say is very professional. I am really supportive of this in the long run. I've got some reservations about right now. I believe that this is transformative, that this has the opportunity to turn a dumpster fire into a clam bake. I mean, to turn something that's ugly and stinky into something that's ought to be part of the culture. And I want to kind of turn one little thing on the head. This whole notion of locals only. I've had a lot of folks that have been asking me, is it safe to come back to Isla Vista now? Is it safe to come back yet? And this, to me, would go a long way towards saying, not only is it safe, it's kind of cool. I mean, there's good stuff happening out here, and it's community building stuff, and you know, I know a whole bunch of folks that would love to come to this that are not strictly local anymore. They were local once, but so I don't want to get, you know, too far in the weeds about that. But that if this is just a UCSB driven event, a locals only in the sense that it's only local students, we have not built community, have we? We've not broadened community. We've got a little demographic that we're catering to, and you know, God love them. You know, I'm very fond of students. You know, you all know that. But they're not the only ones that inhabit this space. This needs to be something that's welcome and community building for the whole community. And I got to say, whether it happens this year or next, it bloody well better not happen 2 years from now. It's got to happen, if not this year, next year. That's my 2 cents.
Just to add on to that, Lucidity itself is a all ages event.
Yeah, oh yeah, I know.
For anybody that
Yeah.
we pride ourselves on the way that we handle
Yeah.
local community and children, and everyone is safe on site.
Yeah, yeah.
I fully hear your observation that this is catering to a very specific demographic within Isla Vista, but that demographic caused the problem.
Yeah.
So it's speaking to that, I think.
Yeah.
And
Old guys and young guys can transform that.
True.
Just turning this into a reservation for young guys isn't going to solve that, now is it? Hadn't worked yet.
Yeah, and I'm all for serving our whole community, but with this, I'm for serving our constituents, our taxpayers, and in time, I think we want people from outside of Isla Vista to come in for this festival. But right now, I'm concerned about the people we already have in the streets during this. But I hear you.
Thank you.
One thing I just want to add before I go over to Christy is I think that our role as a board, being very policy driven, it can be hard to, I think, sort of go along with things that are big unknowns. And one of these big unknowns that we've talked about and that I've stood by as saying is going to make a big difference is just the fact that we are changing the name and marketing this differently. And I just want to reiterate that I still believe that, and I believe it now more than ever, because the intentionality that people come in with to Deltopia is going to be entirely different than the intentionality with which people will come into this event. Yeah. And I think that that on its own is going to be a major push away factor for some of the elements that we've seen in the past, because some of the elements that we've seen in the past that have caused problems are a result of knowledge that the event as it is now is anarchical. It's chaos. And certain types of people that are out there to do wrong thrive in environments of chaos. So just the structure that we're setting up now, I think, will go a long way in terms of being able to deter some of that. And the name change and the marketing change along with it will I think do wonders. Even right now, I not to pick on UCSB, but when we see those $30,000 to $40,000 going to Instagram ads that say "Don't come to Isla Vista," it's a crazy party. That sort of reinforces this mindset that people are in, I think, when they're here. And having that proactive, being able to own the narrative will totally change that mindset.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go over to Christy because you've been waiting patiently.
I totally agree with that. Just marketing this is super important just because Deltopia is a tradition in Isla Vista. As a member of the Panhellenic community, I would be so interested in helping you guys facilitate the communication between all the organizations. One thing is that I'm not too sure that everyone is going to stop going to Deltopia for this event, but it is an event that will promote public safety. People who don't want to drink alcohol, or people who don't want to party and go hard at Deltopia will go to this event. But the way that we market this and the strategies that we'll use is super important, and the way that you're going to facilitate the communication with these orgs and fraternity houses is super important. You don't want to go and tell them don't play music or the police don't threaten them, but in a way that'll everything will be smooth. So I would love to help you talk to the great organizations.
We would like as much of their input for the change. We're not going there saying, look, this is what we want to do, sign in or sign off on it, or else. The encouragement is for, what do you guys want to see happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, also the idea is exactly what you're saying. It's enlisting, it's getting them interested in what we're doing and showing them how much fun this can add on to what they've already been doing. And except what it's doing is getting people out of the house, out in the sun, running around, like expending energy. And I imagine some will go back, and that's going to be a part of it. There's people that this might even be their last year here in town, and they've been doing it the last 3, and that's how they're going to do it, and it's fine. Let's do it out here together. Let's hear some good music. Let's laugh over here. Let's play these games together, and let's start the transformation of this event, because it's not all going to in 1 year go from this to
Definitely
this.
not.
Yeah.
But we can be incredible with it.
All right, I'm gonna go over to George.
Jonathan,
Yes.
can you tell us where, at this point in time, now that you have a number, where the $180,000 would come from? And also, can you give us a path forward here so we can continue to move ahead on this item?
Yes, I want to bring a more final proposal for a path forward, but some of the basic ideas of where we start. There's 2 places to start with this. Option A is the $93,000 we have at UCSD from our past contribution that we never used, and option B is the $100,000 we put into our reserve allocation in this budget. So both are about the same. They build you the base to start funding this.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
As you know, the money from UCSB has to be expended per agreement between the 2 parties. So far, this board has been incredibly astute in figuring out what UCSB wants the money spent on, and it's helped build this community. I really see serious issues and also a long process in terms of getting the university to agree to spend the $89,000 on this particular item. And I don't think, I can't speak for the university on this one, but I can tell you that the university is very, very conflicted about what to do about Deltopia. And there's probably no one voice. So it seems to me that even if you could, it would take a long time to convince the university that they're 89,000. They have an optics problem, which is putting $89,000 of taxpayers' money, university money, into a community party festival is a real optics issue for them versus putting it into public safety, which is a great. So that I would just say that that's going to take time. It's not to say that it can't happen, and that there are certainly voices at the university that want something other than Buildtopia and want a sanctioned event. But I think trying to convince the powers that be is going to take time. So that comes back to your
Option A and B.
Option A
Well,
and B. Yes,
maybe
I'm sorry.
option A.2 can also be that we look at the 93,000 of how we can fund current
Something
programs,
else.
our current programs, and then free up the budget.
Oh my.
You know, financial magic.
Where's the auditor?
So,
You just missed him.
so those are
Yeah.
that's the base. You need to build that like $100,000 base. We have a program development budget of $30,000 for new programs. This could be seen as one of the new programs. We have a $30,000 community policing budget that could be going towards the security end of this. So that's 60,000 right there. We've started to spend the special projects, but we could say, okay, we want to take 10 or 15 out of that and put it towards this. And so you're almost at 185 at that. Actually, you are at 185 at that point. And then that's not counting if we did get sponsorships or revenue or anything else, which I think would be important and critical. So we have a base amount of money. We can, if we wanted to, we could afford it. It'll be a strain. It'll take up a big part of the budget, but it is possible. Is what I'm trying to say. It's the board's decision to how we move forward on that and how you want me to make that proposal. But it is possible to create something, and I've looked at the different options.
Okay. And so from tonight, where do we go? What's your recommendation in terms of where we go?
So from tonight, tell me if this is, do you want to do this? Like, do we want to, we don't have to approve a contract or a budget or anything, but now that this is real, like this is now on paper as a real proposal, do we want to do it? And if that's the answer is yes, then we'll need to do a few things. We'll need to merge this into a contract. That's relatively easy. We need to create the budget adjustments or budget proposal that would fund it. We'd need to organize the joint meeting with Ivy Rec and Park District. We'd need to, Ross would draft up the facility use agreement, and the professional services agreement for this is simple. And then we have a contract from SBSO ready, so we can just bundle all these into one thing to approve, or multiple items to approve at the next meeting. The big thing would be just to give you a clear budget proposal and a contract and organize a joint meeting with IVRPD, because that's another piece of this is, we wanted to have the board review this to even say, do we want to move forward? So we don't want to ask Ross to draft a contract with IVRPD that we don't even end up wanting to actualize. And then a fourth piece we'd have to also look at, and Spencer's mentioned this before, and we'd want to start looking into this potentially sooner rather than later, is the parking restrictions and how that would go. And there's a whole other path as a part of this, is part of this keep it local and keep it safe, is we want to figure out the parking restrictions too. But that can give a little more in time besides the first three things I mentioned, which need to get done pretty immediately.
Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Just one add, something that you said, the optics issue that I'm very familiar with. When we present ours to the county, it's always an optics issue. The question of taxpayer money going towards a public sanctioned party versus public safety, I don't see this as anything but public safety. It's a creative form of it. As I've said before, infrastructure allows for the funneling of cohesion, of camaraderie, of people following the straight and narrow to some degree, whether it might be a little inebriated. But
Harm reduction.
I'm sorry?
Harm reduction.
Harm reduction completely.
All over the.
It's 100% a creative form of public safety. If you wanted to provide just policing, you get almost the opposite. So I just wanted to be a voice for that because it starts right here in how we talk about it and how the funding is talked about. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you for that. Okay, with that, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Does anyone have public comment on this item?
Yeah, a couple things.
Okay, I'm going to go. I saw a hand in the back, and then I'll go to you, Carlos.
Hi, this is like the first meeting I've ever been to, and I just like really appreciate like everyone coming together and like trying to figure out a way like for harm reduction and all that. I don't know a lot about the event, but it kind of sounds like it's for UCSB students only. Is that correct? No?
That's
okay,
not
good, because I just really want to make sure that the city college kids are like also included into this, because, you know, I started off at the CC first, and one of the things that really sucked was like not being able to be a part of these events, and like I feel like that's where you get a lot of like the chaos too, because like you have this whole part of the community that's like not included. So if they are, like I just really appreciate you guys taking that into consideration. So
Thank you for that. Okay, Carlos?
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Carlos. I'm the chair of the Atlas Recreation and Parks District. I'll just be speaking for myself here. I had a couple of kind of brief logistical questions and then an idea or two. So you all said that for your actual Lucidity event, you take a week to set up the infrastructure?
A week and a half.
A week and a half. I know it's probably not set for this, but is there any envisioning about how long you all would need to set up any infrastructure for this?
We're planning on coming the day before.
Day before, so if the event's on a Saturday, you just do it on Friday?
In theory, that's what we do for, you know, for all the local events that we work for certain sets, Earth Day, Solstice, all of
Okay.
them.
The
So
difference is this is a one-day event as opposed to our 3-day.
Yeah, it's a much shorter thing, that makes sense. Okay, I was just wondering. A lot of my things were actually covered by going over like the plan going forward, because I was gonna say like, y'all have like places and parks set here, but we need to agree on the usage for all of that. The only thing I had was there kind of seemed like to be a back and forth between like ticketing that was paid and no ticketing at all. I do get the things about like making it more expensive if you have tickets because then you have to enforce. But I've been to events where they have ticketing, but it's not paid. It's just like you just have to go online and like get a little QR code or something like that for the day of the event, just as a way to like keep numbers or something like that. And if you could like hook that up with some way of like providing an address or some sort of verification to make sure we live in the area, then you do have to balance that with like how much fencing, how hard do you want to reserve it, but it could give people the idea that there's a limited amount of space.
Can I direct, that's interesting, because you also, in getting somebody to sign up, whatever, even if it's just a gift, like they're signing up for it, and you can put an agreement in there where people are agreeing to whatever clause. I agree to be safe, not do this, not do that.
Yeah. But it'd also be a way to make sure that a good chunk of the people like would see kind of what the overall vibe you're trying to put out. Like before you can click yes, like here's what we're trying to put forward. Is that cool with you? Yeah, exactly.
we can also incentivize to have specific areas where that comes into play instead of the general thoroughfare. Like for example, the beer garden has to have a fence regardless of what we choose.
Yeah, so you have to have that ticket to get.
Right, so you can have other areas that are like that too, that are not alcohol based.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say just like the vitality of having a meeting with the IVRPD as soon as possible so we can sort this out, because like I personally definitely wanna see this happen as high as it can, but we need to make sure everybody's engaged at as high a level as possible. I guess that's it, all I can.
Thank you,
Can I put you
Carlos.
on the spot? Can I put him on the spot?
Sure, be nice.
Do you think Ivy Parks would have some money to help on this?
We talked in the past about some amount of money. I don't wanna be put on the spot and say exactly.
You can't, but
I can't speak
you're
for
open,
exact amount of money.
You're open to the discussion.
We're open, potentially open to discussion.
Great.
Thanks. I think that was nice enough.
We'll take that as
And I just also want to say thanks for your idea about doing some sort of form of like easy QR code ticketing, because I think we've like bounced around the idea a couple times, but I don't know, hearing it in this context makes me think about it in a whole different sort of way.
It might make it easier for us to administer whatever parking permit program we
Yeah.
end up wanting to do. We have some time to figure that out, but might help a lot actually. Because I've been thinking about how we administer that, and that's not going to be super simple either. But if we can combine it with this idea, maybe it will be.
I'm pretty sure Jonathan and I had joked about tying it to voter registration, but that is 100% not happening.
So Jonathan, were you mentioning like having some sort of ticketing and distributing that at the same time as a parking program, or?
I don't know. I mean, if we do the local parking restrictions, we'll need to give people something to, certify that their car is a local car. And so if that is tied in with, paymentless ticket, that might be an easier way to link the two. So.
Yeah, if they were registering beforehand and we could even possibly send it out or have it for pickup here for days before. That way people that have already registered just come pick up that pass and they have it. Definitely something to look into. I'm sure law enforcement's had lots of dealings with vehicles in the past at a time.
I'm really liking this idea. Wow. Good ideas do come from open public meetings.
Additionally, if you can actually incentivize people to park somewhere else by providing a bus, like Jump on the Bus campaign, it helps cut that down. And it also allows for us to ensure that people are driving sober, which is a big thing. And I think we've looked at Earl Warren before, but there's a couple of places you can look at.
And I appreciate the point. I will just say that in my vision, everyone's commuting to this via foot. They're walking and biking.
Yeah.
I don't think
Or
we want
lying.
to.
That's scary.
Or
Lying's
line.
gonna be scary.
Or the scooters. Just because I think we want to keep this as localized as we possibly can.
We definitely hadn't envisioned anybody, yes, and we are on the same wavelength currently.
Yes.
The only thing other than what the young girl back here had mentioned, which has come up in the past about talking with you,
City College.
SDCC, and seeing if and how that invite might include people from Santa Barbara there. And that's something, that's an open discussion.
I think it is an open discussion, and I think, I have never seen the actual numbers on residency of City College students, but I'd say there's a very wide swath of them that are here living in Isla Vista rather than living downtown.
Our marketing manager, Jonah, did actually envision that we would be marketing to City College as well, to enroll them and invite them instead of excluding them purposely and then creating some sort of upset.
Excellent. Go ahead.
So we're talking about making it local and making sure that we're inclusive of City College students and UCSD students, but it ends up being another self-enforcing ID zone for college students. So it would be really great. I would be delighted to attend with my son. I'm a permanent resident of Isla Vista, but without reaching out and make it less local so that other Santa Barbara families, there's just not a contingency that we make it an all-range event based on the demographics of IB.
I am not a parent, this one is, but for me, I would love to do 1 year of this idea and this formula to see where all the problems arise and what happens in that event, and then build out to an all-inclusive, all-ages event. That's my first idea, but I mean, we are always in favor of including children. They bring the happiness. Like, that's what they do.
And it helps with
It does.
public safety.
It does. But it also creates a lot more liability.
Of course, and I think sadly, I think that the reputation of IB would have to change a little bit for even my friends.
Yeah.
Because,
Absolutely.
I think that misstep's important though, and when I bring my own
there's
children,
a lot of
that's
Santa Barbara people that would be really excited about this, and so if they felt that it was a safe event, they would have a way to, just parking is impossible if you have, children, let's say, in that version where families would be coming, that they would have a way to get around easily and get in and out and all that stuff.
Thank you for that. And I just want to say that I share this vision that in the future, this is what we truly have an inclusive event. I think that we talk a lot on this board about culture change, and that to me is what culture change is, and what is sort of one of the higher goals, is that we have an inclusive and diverse group of people at these events. We also, as I think we've talked a lot about today, getting the weeds of this proposal, have to meet people where they're at in order to get the ball rolling. Because I see this as a snowball that can continue to roll down the hill and collect snow, and I mean this in a good way, not in a negative way. Just because but I think that we, to get there, need to have something that people are into, and that the people who are already going to be attending this event, because they know that it's happening and Deltopia is the Ivy tradition and yada yada yada, that they have something that's an alternative to that. I think that one of the things about this project that I think we have all known from the beginning is that we couldn't wait for someone else to say, jump on this. We couldn't wait for the university, we couldn't wait for the sheriff's office, we couldn't wait for the county. We had to be the ones to take the lead on this, because one of the reasons, and this goes back to the reason why I believe that the voters created us in the first place, is because there was not this level of cohesion between these big groups that have their interests in how things go on and how things in IV go on. And it's our job to be the voice for the people that live here. I see this as the solution to a public safety problem that all too often is totally not acknowledged by folks who live here. And I say this as a student and as a resident. I say this as a willing participant in Deltopia in years past. There are a lot of issues that are just plain not acknowledged. We, I think, are able to have frank dialogue about it up here because we think about it as policymakers. We think about the statistics of the medical transports. We think about the statistics of the arrests. But I think for the average person, that gets lost a lot of times. And there's a lot of out of sight and out of mind. Everything that we heard today that's in this proposal is about reversing those trends in a way that helps bring control to the situation and safety to the situation. So I loved what Sarah had to say about the fact that you can look at this as it being a big party that we're throwing, or you can look at it as a very creative way of restoring public safety. Yeah. We've tried in the past the shut it down method. It hasn't worked. We've tried letting things get out of hand. That doesn't work either. This all started because the beaches were open and some people wanted to go drinking floaties, and that didn't work. So every time that we've tried to look at this through the lens of how can we pass an ordinance and change this? How can we change our law enforcement practices and change this? We haven't gotten anywhere except for going backwards. It's our job, and I think the community demands that we look at this from the perspective of culture change. And this is what this is to me. Everything. Harm reduction, catching these problems early, that's all the culture change that we wish to instill. So every time that I meet with Lucidity, I am just continuously impressed with their mindset and their drive to achieve that mindset and spread that to other people and spread it to our community, because it really jives with all of the goals that we have talked about and that I know we all share. I know we are all united in having the goal of a safe community. And so that is sort of my 30,000 feet level pitch for this. And I just want to thank them for selling so well. So with that, I want to have us move forward. I think the question at hand is if we move forward. There have been a couple of proposals, one to scale down, one just a little bit of talk about the money, but I just want to get a temperature check of where people are at.
Have any of you electeds gone out in the community and said, this is gonna cost $180,000 of your utility user, you're paying it. Do you think this is a good idea to spend $180,000 of your utility users on this event? And I realize that obviously we put everything in, it is about harm reduction, but it's also about our your constituents. My constituent.
Yours too.
Yeah. So I would just pose that, and then I would like us to move on. I agree with Father John that this is and I agree with you, Spencer, this is an incredibly difficult thing to pull off. I mean, it's really, given that we don't have the political infrastructure yet, we're still a new body, and even lots of smart people in law enforcement and in associated students and here are not quite sure how we're going to pull this off. To me, it's a process. The thing I feel bad about is that we've dragged Lucidity into meeting after meeting after meeting, and I look at this as a long-term process, multi-year process. So I'm starting to feel guilty about dragging you guys and having you guys produce what would probably cost us money if we had a consultant do it. So that's my only point now, is that I think we should keep going forward, but I think it's premature for us at this point to begin to talk about spending the money. And I would like to urge all of us to go out in the community and say, okay, yes, we're going to put this on, but we're going to use your cable TV money to do it. Are you okay with that?
Not cable.
I'm sorry, cable. Electricity and your gas.
Cable companies have great lobbyists.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish we could know the success rate or who's gonna come, so we can know if we want to go all out with the budget and spend everything. But as of right now, I feel like we should still discuss the budget and how much we actually want to spend on it, just in case all the people from Otobe don't come there and it's not big, then it'd be a waste of money. But we don't know. We can only know once it happens. So that's a discussion to be had.
Ethan?
Thanks. Yeah, and this has been a really helpful conversation, looking at all these different angles. And like I said before, I do want to see a way that we can do this in bites. So I definitely hope to see us move forward with something for this spring. Perhaps if we want to look at moving away from having all the different sites and maybe scaling down to having one stage area and then some other satellite activity zones, if we want to consider that just a little bit. So I definitely would like to see us take the next step and work closely with the Park District on a use agreement, and really make sure that they're bought into this as well, if not for significant financial contribution, at least them feeling comfortable with this and really wanting to do well with this event. I mean, providing the space for this is a big opportunity, and it's a big thing that they would do. So we want to make sure that they are fully on board with moving forward. I think that we should approach associated students more than we have thus far. I know there have been some conversations, and if we need to come at it with a different angle, I think now's the time, just because we do need more organizations to come on. I am still a little bit concerned about the potential for just this being a much bigger event during an already unsectioned event that would just bring a lot of people. But I think that if we are just cognizant of having to mitigate that from the front, and taking steps to just scale this down a little bit, that we'll be in a better position to handle anything that would come. And as far as the budget goes, I'll be honest, when we first were discussing this over the summer, I was anticipating something like $80,000 event for this first year. So we're about $100,000 over where I initially was, and perhaps there's room to go above that 80,000 and not just cut this in half. But that was kind of my starting place on it when looking at all the various services that we fund throughout the year. So I definitely am supportive of scaling this down in any way that we can, and aspiring to, in the next few years, put on this full event.
Ethan? Any other board discussion on this?
So I'll just, to move along, I'll move that we direct staff to bring us back to our next meeting with some more concrete go-ahead. Do you feel like you've got enough input?
I've got great input. I'll get to work on this immediately tomorrow on the follow-up.
Okay.
Ross and I were just talking, can we get a facility use done in about a week? I was thinking we should have a discussion at our next meeting, but then have the joint meeting very soon after, within the month of October. I've already emailed Nicholas for the 29th at 5:30, so if that, think about that date for you all.
Is that our next regular meeting?
Ours is the 22nd, but I was thinking it would not be ideal to put like an artificial end time to that joint meeting where we have to transition still to our regular board meeting, and just maybe something more freestanding. We can advertise, get the community to really show up to as like a focused meeting on that, and give us a little more time to work with the parks.
And could I suggest we also invite other potential partners?
Yeah.
So that it becomes a little bit bigger.
A bigger thing, yeah. Yeah. So at the next meeting, we can have more of a report of the budget, how we can do this, kind of where we're at with that little administrative end of things, but then we'll look to that 29th meeting as where we seal the deal.
Seal the deal on the 29th? So on the 29th, you're gonna ask us to make a decision.
I think if we want to move forward with this, the 29th or the first meeting in November, if we want to push it, it's up to you. I mean, I'm thinking though, like I'm hearing that we need to make a call. So it's.
Can I make a comment as well? I know on our end, so I've heard from law enforcement, I've heard nothing but support, and I get that the idea of going slow and seeing this happen over the discussion and the building of it over multiple years, you see that, hold that side of it as well. For us, having something in a month's time is definitely going to be set us up for success. I know for us as a group, we can go back and look at our budget, and like I said, we've padded it some so that we feel very comfortable with what we're proposing. We can look at the areas that we can draw back some. We can remove areas of content where we don't have multiple stages, and maybe come back closer to what you're looking at originally. I also want to then not put us in the space of where I've heard some concern, maybe we don't draw the people, the crowds that we're wanting to, we put all this money into it and we don't, and so we also run into that if we're starting to pull back and not actually move forward with it in a full good, like, this is what we're doing. So I'd like to re-look at that on our end and find what feels really good and can still bring us back closer to what you're looking at. And if you're doing the same thing on your end and looking at multiple organizations who are willing and wanting to contribute toward that, I imagine if it's meant to be, those things will all align and we'll have an answer.
Can I add, as a community member in the city of Santa Barbara and Isla Vista, because we do actually participate quite a lot with this area, it's part of our demographic for our festival too. We're very interested in supporting this in any way we can. So if it means that we have to re-envision, I mean, this is the ace in the hole for us. This is the idea of this is how we change what's happened and how we fix it and add to it and make it what we've all wanted. And maybe that is a long-term goal, but as you said, something needs to happen for this year. So if we can be realistic on what exactly do we need for sure to have happen, and see that if we put it out there, we want to see these results. If we could have a feeling of that, the amount of meetings we've been through, we are used to. We're very open to this and very happy and appreciative that you guys have looked to us to help support this.
You haven't wasted our time.
Not
You
even.
think you guys
We're
have
here.
meetings?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
We have lots of meetings.
But I heard 80, and I don't wanna hear like numbers thrown out so that we can scale down to that. But what I would love to know is how, if we can support in other ways that are perhaps smaller, and then get up to this model and beyond, preferably with children invited and so on, then that would be awesome. But we're always and ready to help and support, because it's our community too. I mean, there's something that needs to be supported and helped here. I'm being redundant.
So Jonathan, do you need an emotion, or do you feel like you've gotten the direction?
I've got the direction, so I know it's good. You still have a question?
I just wanted to know what kind of potential partners you're looking into. Is it like the city or county, or is it just partners?
Great question. We're going to need all of our government agencies on board to make this happen. The county sheriff's office, UC Santa Barbara, those are the three main ones that come to mind.
But City College is real important too.
City College as well. Okay. So thank you. So with that, I think Jonathan has his direction. Thank you guys so much for going through this process with us, because your passion and genuine care for our community, I mean, I'll be honest, it's a little new to us. We don't really get that from a whole lot of outside groups all that often. It really feels great, the direction that we're going, even if we start with a smaller bite of the apple than we were planning on. I think that this is something that we are going to continue to want to support, and we appreciate all of your expertise and guidance in all of this.
You know, we have some stake in our interests. You know, Deltopia was so bad one year, it pretty much almost shut the city down. So, you know, we have a alternative interest as well to make this work.
Can I just say one small thing?
Yes.
Those of us who have been downrange when bottles were being thrown, we have to do better. And the answer is not lethal force. The answer is less than lethal. The answer is community policing. The answer is community building. It's all of those softer things that build stuff that we all really want to see. And you know, are we going to invest in an armored vehicle to come deal with it, or are we going to invest in a party, for crying out loud? You know, that maybe that party needs to be sold to the powerful. You know, to chancellors and sheriffs and others. I'm down with that.
I'm so sorry, I have to say this. Even Jesus turned water into wine. Like, there is.
Well, now you're
You're saying that to the right person.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm sorry.
I have to tell you, when you said you liked beer, Sarah is my eldest child, Orthodox priest, not Catholic, no scandal involved here. Our daughter Sarah, when she was about 2.5, snuck in and snitched a sip of my Guinness. And I never will forget the look that came on her face, and she went, "Oh, that's good." So anyway.
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, I don't think that I can think of a better note to close out than that. Thank you, Lucidity, for coming, and thank you to everyone who's here from the community for your continued input. We're going to need everyone on board to make this happen. Okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, we're going to move to item 4.5, resolution 19-2, graffiti abatement. Hand it up to John.
So, just quick note at the beginning, it is 19-12, it does say 11 on your sheet, we'll change that. But this is the resolution and the policy and the form that would implement phase 1 of the graffiti abatement program. We've discussed this, I think we've incorporated the board's input. I do want to give you one note. So this morning I went to the property owners meeting that's organized by IVCSD, and I shared with them about this program, some other things we're doing, the census, just talked about this with them. One piece of input that I did get when I handed out the consent form, as I said draft on it. The input I got was that property owners weren't willing to do it if they had to pay. They said they weren't willing to waive their liability and all that the form requests if they had to pay for the the cost of the services to be graffiti abated. So that's something for us to maybe consider. It just came up this morning, and I said I'd bring it. I'd bring the input back to the board if you wanted to think about that differently. But that was something that was brought up by multiple property owners. Said they wouldn't want to sign the consent form if it meant they had to pay on top of waiving their liability and release claims and all that. So
Can you repeat that for George, actually?
yeah,
For my attention.
it is a big one. So we're on the graffiti abatement resolution, and the resolution says, public right of way, we cover the cost. Private property on the public right of way, adjacent to the public right of way, we cover the cost. But if we got consent to go onto private property to clean up graffiti, we charge to the owner. But when I took this packet, I told the property owners this morning about it. The feeling in the room was that they wouldn't want to fill out this consent form if it meant they had to pay. They would be comfortable giving us consent to come onto their property to abate graffiti if there was no cost. But if there was a cost, they wouldn't feel as comfortable. And I did explain about our collaborative intent and not wanting to come down on the hammer, but also build a partnership with people to do all that. But the feeling was they wouldn't want to pay if they had to waive indemnity and claims and everything. So that is a policy decision for the board to make. Of do we want to charge?
Well, and you should. These are mostly the good folks.
Yeah.
In terms of property, so if the good folks are putting up resistance, then it's not a good.
Not a good sign.
Jay?
So my comment on that is that I don't. It always felt a little strange to me that whether it be this aspect or other things, and not necessarily something that I've seen in other places, that oftentimes graffiti is like the cost associated with it seems to be almost arbitrarily assigned to people, and it often feels to me like it is a community issue as opposed to a particular property owner issue. Like it's not obvious to me why if a particular property is getting more graffiti than other places, well that could be because of where the commercial properties are, where the police happen to have better patrolling, where the lighting in the area happens to be, which then causes different groups of whether it be gangs or whether it be teenagers or whether it be weird artists doing doing stuff. It seems weird to me to try to assign that cost seemingly arbitrarily. I'm perfectly okay pulling that cost into our cost, and then essentially now it's a tax on everybody in order to make it so that the community does not have graffiti on it. And so given that feedback, I would suggest just changing it so that we pay for the graffiti abatement on the private property that is visible from the right-of-way in addition to the already intent to pay for the graffiti on the private property, sorry, on the public right-of-way or adjacent public right-of-way.
I'm thinking about this in terms of the dollar amount that we would spend on administering the process for both noticing someone that they were in violation of the ordinance and then eventually having to go through the process of backing up with fines, and thinking that this non-public right-of-way graffiti, I mean, I don't know if you have a good feel on it, Jonathan, but my feeling is that it's probably going to account for a much smaller portion of the total graffiti than the public right-of-way graffiti.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It's not like much small. It's a minority, but it's not like it's not a tiny amount. It's maybe like 30% of what the reports that I've seen. Because we have our app set up to be graffiti in the public right of way versus graffiti in public property, and it notes the difference. So it is like 30%.
Because I'm just throwing it out there that I would be willing to go along with Jay's suggestion, you know, in the event, you know, just out of the thought that backing this up and administering the fines would both cause headaches for people and also cost us more money. George?
Can we approve this with that change, or does it have to come back?
That's what I was just trying to look at.
Oh yeah. So the file that we had attached is a little broken. Give me one second so that I can pull that up for Ross.
Well, I would agree, and you know, we're just starting out on this, and so we can always, a year from now, after we've looked at it and seen if it's a huge, we can amend it. But it seems to me if we're getting if we're getting pushback from our community, part of our community,
yeah,
maybe we should just go forward with it without that clause. But the question is do we need to bring that back to the next board meeting or can we amend it?
I think I'd feel better doing that. That way I can make sure that the policy is consistent.
Okay.
If I just take out a section upon further
Yeah.
review, I might find artifacts that were for a policy position that the board doesn't want to take.
yeah.
I don't think it'll take much, but I would feel better having it come back if that's going to be the policy direction that the board wants to take.
Do you want to, can I make a motion to that effect? Make that we amend it and we bring it back at the next meeting?
Second.
Okay, made by Thurlow, seconded by Freeman. Is there any other board comment on this? Jay?
Also note that it is a very, very, very silly minor typo. It says his slash, oh, maybe that's actually correct. Everyone gives hers, it says gives his slash hers slash its consent as opposed to his slash her slash its consent. But at that point, I just want to, can we just say there?
Sure.
Is there a legal reason why we could start moving the policy direction of using the gender neutral singular as opposed to
Only the fact that there is not singular, it's plural.
well,
Yeah.
By definition.
that's the argument these days. So a lot of people will argue that that's
It's not a hill I want to die on. So
okay.
perfectly fine putting down.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of good.
Okay. Any other board discussion on this? Because I'm going to open up public comment. Okay. Go ahead.
I couldn't find online more information on this program. I'm a property owner, but I guess I'm not a part of the property owner association, so I don't know where it stands. I don't know the details are, but I'm very interested in knowing more about it. What's the best way to?
Yeah, I'd love to I can meet with you outside the meeting. My email is on the website, ilovevistacsd.ca.gov, and we can talk. Yeah, it was a property, the renter, property owners who rent to tenants association. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. So I think we're in the direction of bringing this back. Any other public comment on this? Okay, I'll bring it to the board. Made and seconded.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absence. Okay, thanks everybody. So I think we're going to skip down to reports before we go into closed session. We're going to start off with reports from members of the board. Any members of the board have reports? Jake?
So I attended the California Special Districts Association annual conference along with our assistant general manager. And one thing that I will note is that Jeff Hodge was elected the president of the California CSDA. So we have a pretty strong connection to the organization. I attended a mini version of something that I know Deborah attended, a more complex version of it on policies versus procedures, because that's something that's continually come up in our policy committee. And ended up bringing up an idea of an aspect from technology called Chesterson's fence that actually the audience seemed very interested in, and I got a bunch of questions about. I attended multiple talks on district technology usage and did not agree with everything there, but you know, some aspects of it are just the laws are so annoying. And I now have a friend working at on trying to do policy changes as part of some internship program at the state level, and I hope that we can just try to fix some of these issues. I went to a talk on avoiding forced dissolution at the LAFCO level, something that I know is sometimes a concern that, oh, what if LAFCO wants to do something like that on LAFCO, so that can help, but learning more about when that sort of situation can come up and how to avoid it long before it does. To talk on leveraging partnerships, particularly with respect to the topic of the event. And also Deborah went to all this talk as well, and I figured her report she might provide some more context, but it was on leveraging partnerships with other entities in the local community, other governments, nonprofits, particularly with respect to homelessness issues. And one particular surprise that ended up happening is that I ran into the general manager of the park district from the 80s and had a rather long conversation with him about the aspects of governance and issues thereof, and both current and then, and there's some things, interesting ideas I think that ended up coming back here. So.
All right. Thank you, Jay. Sounds like it was a great event. Okay, any other reports from the board? Okay, I'm just going to skip mine and we'll go to standing ad hoc committees. Okay, going over to district council.
Okay. Jonathan had asked for me to give you an update on the parking agreement with IVRPD. And some of these comments have been relayed to me from Jonathan, who had a meeting with the Park District to try and figure out a way forward. As it sits right now, we're sitting in an impasse. The Parks District has taken a number of positions that prohibit me from giving you a recommendation to move forward with an agreement. Primarily, it stems from the language in the indemnity agreement. They did take some steps forward, which is a positive step, but the standard that they're adhering to in the indemnification section, it's a high standard that is not consistent with dangerous conditions of public property law, which is in the government code, section 830 and 835 and 835.2. If you're interested in following along at home and then promptly falling asleep. They did also address some of the concerns that I had raised about the termination provisions. Up until recently, the Park District had been taking the position of having a termination without notice provision, which under the terms of the agreement could be for something as simple as violating the no overnight parking provision. So for example, if you had a meeting that went late and you had people who were attending the IVCSD meeting at 12:01, that's beyond their no parking time, and so technically that would be a violation of the agreement, and then they could revoke and terminate the agreement with no notice, as an example. Some of these examples are, some might say, well, that's kind of an extreme example, and that's not something that the Park and Rec District would do. But as a lawyer, we're bound by the four corners of the agreement. So we can't go on the good intentions of people that aren't expressed in the agreement. So I kept trying to push to have the good intentions embodied in the agreement so that we knew where everybody stood. And we haven't made any progress on that. So they did put into the agreement a cure period for these types of termination events, which is great progress. But really it comes down to the maintenance provisions and the indemnification provisions. So as it sits right now, IVRPD they either have or going to pave the lot. So they are in control of the process of quality control for this public facility. So that means they have selected a contractor or will select a contractor. They will be overseeing the contractor carrying out their duties, and they are ultimately in control as to what the final product of this is going to be. This is going to be a place where people are going to be coming and parking and walking. And as soon as you start having places where people come and park and walk, you have people who come and park and walk and trip and fall. And it's that last couple of verbs that really get public entities into trouble. As the current agreement sits right now, whether they are our invitees or the Park District's invitees, this district, IVCSD, would be responsible for those incidences no matter what. So not just for people coming to IVCSD meetings, because it's not an exclusive license, anybody coming onto the property for IVRPD types of events, this district, IVCSD, would have responsibility. And we just can't get, for whatever reason, we can't get past this. My understanding is that they're insisting on this because IVCSD is not willing to pay for this agreement. So they feel that the Park District should not be responsible for what in my mind are occasions that they should be responsible for, because it has nothing to do with the conduct of this district or the district's invitees or the district being responsible for when it's inviting the public in to use this parking facility. But we just, for whatever reason, have a disagreement as to how the apportionment of liability should come down. So as the agreement sits right now, it's not something that I can recommend, because I think it broadly expands the amount of liability that this district would take on, and inappropriately shifts the responsibility for the facility to this district from the Park District, when the Park District is the one ultimately that's putting this parking lot into the condition that it's going to be in when you all sign up to use it, essentially. Also, if any third parties come on and mess up the parking lot, they gouge it, they put, if you're staging equipment, whether it's IVCSD's vendor or if it's the Park District's vendor, this district is solely responsible for the maintenance of it. It's hard for me to be able to come to you as a board and say, I recommend that you approve of this, when you would be responsible for the conduct of third parties that has nothing to do with you providing the services that you provide. So I can't really speculate as to, beyond what I've been told, that a lot of this is coming from the fact that the IV Park District is taking this position because IVCSD is not paying for the parking agreement and for this part-time use. Have I left anything out, Jonathan? Okay. So at this point, I don't have an agreement. It is a breakdown in the negotiations between this district and the Rec and Park District. Jonathan has been actively involved in trying to ferret out what the issues are and to provide them to me so that I can have the agreement reflect where the parties stand. But at least at this point, the agreement that IVRPD would be willing to sign is one that I cannot recommend to this board for approval. So absent further direction from the board, I'm not sure what else it is that can be done to have this parking agreement situation resolved. I think the only other thing that I really could do would be to provide where the agreement is as it sits, and then have board discussion and then direction as to where I should take it. I think my only comment is that these things should not be this hard. Typically they are not this hard, especially between local governments, but beyond that, it's a policy question for their board. It's taking their position. I've taken the policy direction from this board, and I haven't been able to come up with a deliverable that I believe is consistent with my duty as this district's attorney to adequately represent its interests.
Clarifying questions, go ahead.
So, just want to verify that this is about the community center parking, not the presentation we had at the last meeting with relation to, an overnight parking program. Okay, all right, community center
The
parking.
first part, yes, correct.
Okay, good, all right.
Yeah, I mean, all I'll say is that this will be part of my report, but we do have some extra time to figure this out, and so we can continue reopening the discussion with IVRPD and negotiate where we can figure out common ground here. So we have a little more extra time because of what I'll tell you about in my report.
A clarifying question also. So what you're saying is that they're going to control the resurfacing of the parking lot.
Yeah.
And if they don't bring it up to a safe result, you know, if the deliverable is not a good one, if it's got potholes in it, it's too thin or whatever, we will be responsible for those potholes and for whatever danger might be there because of it, unless we choose to come back in and at our own expense redo it.
Correct.
Well, actually, what it does say is that when we end the contract, we need to give it back in the condition we got it too. So if whatever they surface it at, anything that happens throughout the year, we need to bring it back up to the condition we got it. So if they did a really great job, that means we'd have to go back and do a really good
And
job.
if they did
as
a
well.
crummy job, I'll borrow a Humvee and come in and.
Like, one of the suggestions that I had raised was make this an exclusive agreement, in which case it would make a lot more sense, because this board, this district would have effectively sole control over the use of this parking lot. It would be able to gate it, it would be able to manage it, it would be able to make sure that it's maintained properly. That wasn't something that the park district was willing to do. In not granting an exclusive license, they can now contract with other peoples and with other entities or groups and also use it for their own purposes, which again is fine. That's the direction that they receive, from their board. But if that's the case, then it is not something that I could recommend to this board that it take on the liability and the responsibility for maintenance that's caused by third parties that's completely divorced from this board carrying.
They can use it for their own purposes without assuming the liability for what might happen there.
The way that this agreement is in its current form is, yes, that leaves that possibility open. And that's
Ross, I have a question for you. Have you had a chance to sit down one-on-one with their lawyer and talk these issues out?
Yep.
And I asked that question because I already knew the answer, just because I want this board to know, because that is the state of where the negotiations are at. And we have had meetings where we have requested that Ross be able to sit down with their lawyer, and well, here we are. So I think when Ross said things like this shouldn't be this hard, that really encapsulated the entire frame of mind that I've been in about this. So
Good.
Okay. Well, Ross, thank you for that report. I think we will have to bring this to a meeting with them, with their board, to try and hash things out, because there has to be some sort of a miscommunication or misunderstanding happening that we can't seem to get this figured out. So, okay, report from the general manager.
I don't have I have some good news, but less than the good news this meeting and more on the bad news. So the community center, first of all, there was issues with the pipes and the HVAC system in that building as well, which led to mold being discovered in the bathrooms and the kitchens. The mold's been remediated at this point, but they had to tear out some of the walls. And so I have pictures if anyone wants to see after the meeting. But it's going to take until mid-November for the work to be done. The work for phase 2 and like the renovations and the contractors that came in to bring the building up, that's over. So that is done, but the work that's being now is more of a maintenance job directly by the county. So that's where we're at there. The agreement is also going to be on ice for a couple weeks, just out of the preference of the county, since there's no building to agree to operate yet, since it's still in this maintenance mode. So there are some delays there. We are still moving forward with the reception and the ribbon cutting on Saturday, so it'd be great to have all the directors there. It looks like a lot of people in the Santa Barbara community are coming. I was just at the Bread and Roses Festival and everybody was saying they're looking forward to it. So we're still going to have the event, and so this Saturday at 11 a.m. And so it's going to be slightly differently framed. It's not, hey, we're celebrating taking the keys, but more celebrating the great work that's been done so far and just looking forward to when we do get the keys. So me and Deanna are also going to, now that there is no building, when we thought there would be a building, it's at least maybe just a chance for us to do more focused work on fundraising and building prep and figuring out all the different pieces that the county will be giving us responsibility for in the agreement, like the landscaping and the janitorial. It just gives us a chance now to really focus on getting those things squared away ahead of when it opens. But we've hit a delay there. Then also on the community resource building, the building we are in, the community room still has a few more weeks out at least to be able to be open again, because the work that was done in there to get rid of the mold was significantly more altering to the room. I went inside today. The whole kitchen is gone. The wall is exposed. The bathroom is all exposed. It doesn't look like the same room almost. And so they're going to be working on rebuilding. And I heard they're doing new kitchen cabinets, but that's not going to take. The mold issue is over, and that got done. But now we're moving into the rebuilding phase. But also just in general, Deborah and I have been working with them in other parts of the building to identify where HVAC has been leaking and causing collection in the ceiling tiles, and it's in one of our spaces and one of the UCSB spaces, and I think also the Ivy Youth Project space. And this seems to be the pattern of the HVAC might be one of the problems, because one thing, I didn't mention this in the community center, but one reason it's going to take till November isn't just the kitchen, but they have to, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last meeting, but the original phase 2 said they're going to get a new HVAC system, but then they told us that they're going to repair the HVAC system instead. Well, they're going back to building a new one. So that might resolve the mold issues permanently in the community center, but it's making me think that we might need a new HVAC system in the community resource building, because they fixed one of the leaks, and it was like a few days before we found another collection in the same room and had to just, delay us bringing that room online. So, we've got some building issues. Yeah.
And the leak that was discovered in the community room is actually initially was due to an HVAC issue.
It was one for pipes. It was both HVAC and pipes. I think this HVAC was more significant. So that's the bad news. So Viviana and I have organized the first local census committee meeting. It's going to be on October 21st from 12 to 1. It's going to be at UCSB. We've been outreaching to lots of different groups to get them involved so that we can make sure everyone's counted in the census. We have begun parking enforcement in our lot, so we haven't towed anybody, so don't worry. But we're putting on the permits, and that's part of our process. Start just making people more aware that you can't park here during business hours because we have the tenants using the lot. We're going to be looking into better signage for the lot, because I think the signage now is a little deficient, and just letting people know where they're entering and the different rules and all that. So we're looking into that, and we're going to make it so that you can report it on the C-Click Fix app to us that if someone's parking without a permit, so we can have a log. Because I wouldn't want to tow anybody on their first violation, and so this would just give us a log. Like, okay, this person keeps parking here 5 times in a row without a permit. Now maybe it's their time, compared to someone didn't know and they just parked there. We don't want to be that harsh. The mediation program, Brandy had a loss in her family, and so she won't be in the office for the next month. But she's going to continue to be available to do mediations, and which is helpful because we actually have had even 3 in the last week come in, and so the program usage is actually really picking up, which is great. And so, and one thing we've discovered too is that the program helps resolve problems before they even have to come to mediation. So some people have just requested mediation and helps resolve the problem. And then lastly, I did meet with the owner of Deja Vu, and he just saw me on the street and we talked a bit, and I told him about our new ad hoc committee, and he seems pretty excited to participate. So we'll get that organized pretty soon, and we've got at least one business owner ready to go to work with us on it. So that's the end of my report.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Any questions from the board? Okay, then go ahead, Jay.
It's not a question, it's a back of the, I just want to say that at the Thursday's Isla Vista Community Network meeting this week, there's Free SB is going to be coming in order to talk about the potential for what policy should be in the merit-based local retail cannabis retail dispensary business permitting program with the county. And so if anyone's interested in hearing or talking more about that, that will be, I think actually here at 11:45 on Thursday.
The community network is
Yeah,
here?
network meeting has been, because they can't be at the CRB,
Yes.
so I believe they're here.
It is here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Jay. Seeing nothing else, I think we are gonna move back to item 5, closed session. Real property negotiations for 970 and 976 Embarcadero Del Mar. We will report back to open session upon conclusion of the item and report any reportable action. If you do that, I'm gonna use the restroom.
Where is that?
3, 4, Markeeps. Yeah, the new grocery store in Vancouver Plaza.
Is it sinking?
Yeah, and so they've stopped construction.
Land subside, this is one, those types of issues are huge.
That's gotta be unnerving.
Okay, we are reconvening to open session. Council, can you report out?
Yes, in closed session, the Board of Directors discussed and gave direction and authority to the real property negotiators as identified on the agenda regarding price and terms of payment for leasing of 976 Embarcadero Del Mar and 970 Embarcadero Del Mar, as well as terms for purchase of both properties on a timeline to be determined.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Birch.
Wait, I want a third it.
Made by Nguyen,
Thanks,
seconded by Bertrand. Any public comment, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0 with 2 absences. Thanks, everyone.
Just getting ready to adjourn. I don't want to miss him. Well, he's a good partner for paying the boundaries.
Good night to you. Christine, you do well.
I went to the UCSB alumni awards dinner, so I ended up sitting next to